not all students can be seen by an individual teacher at the one time. And so we wanted to have a bit of a tool that could help our students when the teacher was busy with other students in the classroom.
You're listening to Around the School Table, hosted by me, Steve Davis, and proudly powered by Zuno Suite. We'll be bringing together the many voices shaping primary and secondary education across Australia, from principals and teachers to education thought leaders and system innovators. Whether you're in the classroom, the staff room, or the boardroom, this is your podcast to be informed, inspired, and connected. Today on Around the School Table, we're joined by Danni Mattiazzo, Assistant Principal at Larrakeyah Primary School in Darwin, whose innovative leadership earned the school the Australian Education Award for Best Use of Technology. Danni will share how their locally developed IntelliLearn platform empowers students with just the right level of guidance, blending technology and assessment to transform learning. From building a culture centred on critical thinking and collaboration to using data to support teachers, Danni's insights offer a compelling vision of how evidence-based innovation can thrive in early childhood education, especially in vibrant, diverse communities like Darwin. I think this conversation will end up being a must-listen for educators who are eager to harness technology without losing the human touch. Danni, welcome to Around the School Table.
Hello, thank you for having me today.
Let's get right into it. Larrakeyah Primary School, 500-ish students in Darwin. It's just won Best Use of Technology, the Australian Education Awards, for the IntelliLearn platform I just mentioned. I've been told the software's like having a teacher sitting next to the student, guiding but not giving too much away. How do you describe IntelliLearn and what it does?
Yeah, of course. So I would agree with that assessment of IntelliLearn. It was the reason why we designed it in the first place. We're understanding that not all students can be seen by an individual teacher at the one time. And so we wanted to have a bit of a tool that could help our students when the teacher was busy with other students in the classroom. And so large class sizes are a problem these days, and varied learning needs are as well. And so our tool helps teachers differentiate lessons, and the feedback that IntelliLearn gives our students is catered to their needs.
I do a fair bit of work with AI in my day job, in my marketing practice, and that constant thing of customizing language, etc. This is just an off-the-cuff question. Tell me, when I went to school, every teacher had a very different persona. Does IntelliLearn have grumpy teacher, happy teacher, etc., or is it a Larrakeyah voice?
No, it's absolutely the same voice that the students listen to,
Yes.
Which we have catered around the curriculum. So obviously when you're tailoring an AI tool and using, a version of ChatGPT, you have to obviously put in the inputs you want. We're dealing with children here. We want to make sure that they're getting the right information. And so we were very careful with what it's drawing its information from. So hopefully no grumpy teachers amongst there.
I mean, that's all part of the charm, though. Anyway,
True.
Wixies, a Darwin-based education tech company, was engaged to build IntelliLearn.
Mm-hmm.
By staying local, I guess you made this a win, not just for Larrakeyah Primary School, but also Darwin. Was that deliberate?
Look, I think when you're in a school, we want to invest in people that we're already investing in. And so Wixies actually they come in twice a week to do all our IT needs. So they run all the maintenance for our IT. And so we had a good relationship with them. And so, it made the process a lot smoother. We were able to, run meetings, tell them exactly what we wanted, and then they went off and engaged in their own developers of the system.
I believe you've attended a number of AI-related conferences yourself ahead of building IntelliLearn. One thing that you took away from them was how unuseful being too useful can be for a young learner. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken, the pilot you came up with wasn't suitable because it did too much work for the student. Can you tell us more about that and elaborate?
Yeah, of course. So going to AI conferences, you get a bit of an understanding into how it should look into schools. And I think one takeaway for us was that when you use it as a feedback system, it can be overwhelming for the child. So when you input data, which we were doing, we were going to input a final assessment writing task for the students and get it to develop all the feedback around it. But that's overwhelming because you're getting every element. And so we wanted to redesign it for it to be simple questions asked, and then they could then, of course, get feedback related to their question, not the whole thing. So, for instance, you could be looking at adjectives, and that's your main focus. So rather than saying, give me feedback on this piece of work, our students highlight the sample of text that they want feedback on, and they will ask a question like, how can I improve the adjectives used in my text? And then our tool will then give them that feedback.
That is really close to emulating a human, because a teacher wouldn't just spill everything from their brain. They would have picked up the cues of what was relevant at the moment, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. And I think that's what we really wanted to be careful of, is not overloading the student with too much, because obviously any feedback can be taken negatively. And so if you're giving too much, it could actually have a negative impact on the student. And then therefore, instead of them being proud of their work, they're instead feeling like, oh, I haven't done good enough. And we don't want that. We want them to feel empowered and feel proud of the work they produce. And I think having IntelliLearn, it helps them do that.
I'm not sure this is the correct analogy, but I review a lot of theatre, and when I see Shakespeare, I have this mode I go to where I switch my brain into neutral, because if I try and pick up on every single word, I'm exhausted, but you get the vibe of it as you go through. I guess in a rough way, that's kind of what's happening here.
Absolutely. Yep, it is.
Which leads us closer to that dreaded sense of assessment. I mean, at its core, IntelliLearn has, I've been told, BrightPath embedded, which is an evidence-based formative assessment tool for K9. Now, on Around the School table, we're hoping to come back and go into that BrightPath in more depth. But how would you describe BrightPath?
So I think writing is such a hard topic to mark and assess against. You know, you see rubrics and they're just overwhelming. And every child is so different. So, you know, a child could be doing really well with their use of adjectives, but their sentence structure is off, or their use of paragraphs is amazing. However, they're not very good at the cohesiveness of their text. And so BrightPath, I think, is a really good assessment tool, because you are just basically looking at a sample of work and comparing it to another. And obviously there's other things involved. It's not as simple as that, but it's pretty simple to use. And I think it's given us the next steps for our students as well, because you're able to look at the score that they get. And then from that, it says this is what that score can do. This is the next steps for that particular score. And then we can use that in our goals, and then students can work towards that to better the score they get the next time they sit the assessment task.
Is that all at an individual level?
Yeah, absolutely. So every single text is comparative using the BrightPath ruler. And so it gets quicker as you get used and familiar with what the expectations are and what the ruler states and, you know, what each text looks like. You get quicker with it, and it's taken our staff a while to get onto it, but it is basically a text comparative, and it's really good.
I love how you pointed out that assessing narrative is a challenge, because before, when you're talking about adjectives, I was trying to smartly come up with an adjective to throw in. All I could come up with was adverbs, so I would have floundered.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those tricky things for our teachers. And I think eliminating the rubrics and going to the BrightPath tool has made it a simpler process, but also more informative of what their students can do at that level and what the next steps for their students are.
And just to confirm, this is students showing comprehension of provided text as well as having text they've crafted marked?
So no, we are given like a booklet, and in the booklet is a sample that has been marked by BrightPath, and it's scored. And so that's been crafted and created by BrightPath. We as a school just get the students' final assessment piece and compare it, and then that gives us the score of that writing sample.
Continuing to talk about evidence-based assessment, you've spoken about using student maps previously to observe data trends across classrooms. How do you help your staff, your teachers, especially new ones or early career teachers, move from seeing data as overwhelming to seeing it as actually insightful and actionable?
Yeah, I love this question because not many people like data, but I definitely do. And so as a school, we do lots of data dives. And so we meet with our teachers weekly in teaching team meetings to discuss what's happening in the classroom. From that, we look at the different levels in our classes and we differentiate our lessons. So every lesson we give to our students has been differentiated at below and above level task. Additionally to that, we have termly check-in points where our students are identifying whether their students are at, below and above for numeracy and writing. They then from that come up with strategies that they can implement in their own classroom, but then we also look across the cohort, what are our issues? So then we go into there and we look through NAPLAN, PAT, and look at what the trends are across all of those assessments so that we can then do sprints, which are like mini 10-minute warm-ups that are done every lesson to embed the skills that we see are an issue across the cohort.
So are teachers looking at the feedback for the students in their class and seeing overall where we're above, in the middle, below, and if there are some, inverted commas, deficiencies, that's when a sprint is suggested to, I guess, just get warmed, just like a sports person doing warm-ups before they go on to the main arena. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Yes. So they are at the class level because we want to address the cohort needs to ensure that we're giving them or looking for the gaps that potentially were missing from previous years.
Can you ground this in an example of a particular part of the curriculum just to walk us through to make sure we have all come along for the ride?
Absolutely. So a good one that comes to mind is that we looked at our NAPLAN and PAT data, and place value seemed to be a bit of an area across the school that our students were still achieving at, but not where we would like them to have been. And so we gave them a pre-assessment. We then marked that pre-assessment and we were able to see exactly what the gaps were. So some things that came to mind were the place value of the 0 within a number. So a lot of the students were able to do the number, but when we asked them what was the purpose of the 0, they couldn't identify that. So then what's happened is the teachers would then look at that and they come up with activities that could address that, and then they do that as a warm-up within class.
Still juggling forms the old-fashioned way? Say hello to Student Forms by Zuno. You can create, collect, and manage all your student forms online in one simple, secure platform. Save time, stay organised, and quick access everything you need, anytime. Visit zuno.com.au and see how Student Forms by Zuno can work for your school.
If you didn't have this suite of tools, IntelliLearn and all the other things embedded, what's the difference between the current state of your school and the prior state, which many other schools would be in at the moment? Would some of these things be missed, for example?
Absolutely. I think what we have is that we've got some really great processes in place regarding curriculum expectations, programming expectations, and I think just the expectations of our teachers into how they interact with data. And so to have that, you need to have your data experts in the school that can bring them along on the ride. We also do a lot of check-ins with our staff to ensure that they're understanding the data that they're receiving. But I think, having leadership involved in conversations around data really helps too, because it gives teachers an opportunity to share the successes of their class, but then also understand what their next steps might be. And I think it puts more value to what they're collecting the data for, because we're actually taking the time to listen.
And just practically, what does that data look like for your teachers? Is it numbers? Is it maps? What does it look like?
So we use a lot of data, I have to be honest. So firstly, I know it sounds a bit overwhelming, but we have got there over time. It's not an overnight process. This has been over a long time building up to the data sets we collect. So firstly, we have all our standardized tests which get stored on the student maps. And so that's your progress over time. So things that the teacher that comes into the next year can view, and then from that, start from day one implementing and ensuring that they're targeting teaching to the student needs. We also do rubrics for every achievement standard, and our rubrics are an at, below and above. We try to make the rubrics student friendly so that they can understand what happens. And this is a really good tool for them to use for data, for goal setting, but also to understand where they're sitting and what their needs are. And it's also a good conversation point with parents, because throughout the year, the parents are able to see the rubrics filled out and understand what their student can do. We obviously have the system-wide data like NAPLAN and PAT. That's the expectations of the school mandated by the department. And then we have our scores and numbers. So we use a whole heap of things, but something that I think is the most effective is just that simple colour coding of at, below and above. So on the rubric, at, below and above, these guys are above, these guys are below, these guys are at. What are we going to put in place to best support them in the classroom so that if they were to do this assessment again, what's the how can they improve?
In this system, is there still place for gut feel and subjective interpretation on the part of, well, both staff as well as students and parents? And how often is that aligned or misaligned with what the data is saying?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. There is obviously opportunities for gut, but I think what we've tried to work really hard to as a school is actually have our teachers understand what the achievement standard for that learning area is and unpack it in their planning day so that they know what an at-level student should be doing. And if they have a really clear understanding before even going into the lessons, then they know the expectation at the end. And therefore, it alleviates the gut and that I'm not quite sure. However, there are, always those circumstances where you've got, and we always say, come and have a discussion. Let's go and confirm with our teachers. Let's go and look at what they're giving that student and compare. So it's just, I think, being really open and having, time to discuss it too.
Danni, at risk of getting you into some political trouble, and you can refuse to answer this question, I'm getting the sense that with IntelliLearn working with you and everything that's part of it, you're learning a lot at a granular level about how students and teachers are interacting with the curriculum as set, and possibly, maybe, spotting some blind spots or some gaps in the way the curriculum is set at a macro level. Could you foresee a day where there's feedback coming from your lived experience with IntelliLearn that the people at the top end of curriculum setting might say, you know what, let's make some changes here?
Well, it's quite funny. We were actually asked to be part of the ACARA when they were changing for the version 9. So I think they do allow for feedback. And so if they were going to review the curriculum again, I think they would reach out to schools as they did the first time round. I found that gave our school a bit of a jump ahead because we were able to get an insight into what it was going to look like, offer feedback, and then look at how we were going to attack it when we moved over to the new version.
I'd love to be at a fly on the wall of that meeting when you give them an at, above or below rating.
Well,
let's leave that.
I won't comment now, but that's okay.
Now, this is not the first time you've received an award at the Australia Education Awards. I've been told in 2022 you won an award for your STEM program. And I believe one of the programs you ran was getting your students to design enrichment items for the local dingo park. Are we basically talking widget spinners for dogs?
Oh, if only. Look, some of them came up with those ideas, I'm not going to lie. What we do is each year we do a whole school STEAM day, and that particular one was involving the wildlife park. I reached out to them because I do feel that students are more inclined to solve problems when they have a connection to it and that empathy is there. So I reached out to them and asked them to provide 2 problems that we could put forward to our community. One of them was about, it's hot in the territory, how can we cool our guests down? And the other one was about the dingoes and they get bored really quickly, let's make some enrichment items. So we had theme parks for dogs. We had all sorts of things come out. However, we had to be realistic. And so our students went through the design thinking model. So they did the process, they came ideated, they prototyped, and then from there we picked some winners and they got to actually make their creations come to life, and we delivered them and got to give them to the dingoes and have a bit of a pat as well.
Can you remember them enough to describe one of them?
Yeah, absolutely. I was Delta was her name. She's so friendly. She was on a lead, and she was a beautiful animal. Actually, you would have thought she was a puppy, but we had to be cautious, of course. But yeah, lovely. And we got to see her sniff around the boxes, try and find some of the treats hidden amongst it as well.
Now, as someone who's lived in Darwin during the wet season, I'm a bit disappointed you didn't choose how do you keep the guests cool.
We did. It was just that was for the early childhood students. So we broke it up. So the middle upper did the dingoes and the early child did do the keep the cool.
Any tips?
Well, a lot involved water, I must say. Water and those spray fans.
All right. Now, everything we've been talking about, and all this success you've had, it's got to come back at some point to the school culture. And to that end, I believe that since 2016, you've developed the 4 C's, which are, if I'm correct, communication, creative learning, collaborative learning, and critical thinking. Can you talk us through the rationale behind those 4 C's and how they, interact with daily life?
Yeah. I think we are very lucky. We have a principal that's been here for a very long time, and her vision is remarkable. And so she's forever looking at how to improve the school. One of the things in her research was all about 21st century learning being the new aged way of teaching. And so from there, we had to look at how could we upskill our students for the future. And so we have developed the 21st century skills. Well, I shouldn't say we developed them because they were already there. What I should have said is that we defined them so that there was consistent language used across the school in what they meant for Larrakeyah Primary School students. So, for instance, collaboration was time and space. We don't want students to just be sitting and talking to their friends. We want them to be able to communicate online. We want them to be able to communicate with IntelliLearn. We want them to be able to communicate with people that aren't just their close circle of friends. And so we made definitions around that to suit our school needs.
That's taking people out of their comfort zones.
Absolutely. And I think that is what we need to do to ensure our students are ready for whatever job is in the future.
And I can't go past without asking about critical thinking. How do you apply that? How does that work its way into daily life?
Yeah, so I think, well, we definitely do it through our STEAM days because they're having to think outside the box and come up with, solutions that don't yet exist. We do it through simple things like social issues that happen within the playground, like let's think about solutions around this. We get them to do a lot of cross-checking in maths. So if this is one way to get there, what's another way to get the same answer? So that's more for our extension students, but it's giving them those skills of being able to, is there another way to solve this problem?
In fact, when I'm talking to people about AI, I often say it works best when you're using it within your field, your domain of expertise. So you have a sense of what the right output should look like, just like using a calculator. Otherwise, you're trusting blindly. And so that, I think, dovetails in that critical thinking sphere.
Yes, I agree.
Now, for schools interested in learning more about this technology, especially up there, I believe the NT Department of Education is now involved in potentially rolling out IntelliLearn, which is awesome. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm not sure about the rolling out part.
Okay.
What I do know is that we've created it within our school, and then, of course, to have it shared anywhere else. And we've got the permissions to use it within our school. But if it's to go any further, it needs to run through the checks of the department to ensure that it meets all of their standards.
But we'd have to think one day that's got to be on the cards.
Well, look, that's the reason why you develop these things is to, better the education and, help students feel like they can do something.
Last of all, if there's a teacher listening to this podcast and they're thinking they'd like a change of lifestyle and temperature, at the day we're recording this, it's blowing a gale down here, down south, and what is it, 23 degrees or something and sunny where you are in Darwin?
Look, it's a bit higher than that, and the humidity's starting to set in. However, I cannot complain. So you want to know how? Well, it would be getting in touch through an email through our admin team. You can search up our school and they've got a website and you'd be able to find the details there.
And you'd welcome to have some people move up north, wouldn't you?
Look, if we've got positions, I mean, that's the other thing we're very lucky with. People are happy to be in our school at the moment. So, not sure if the positions are there, but always you never know what the end of the year brings because we are a transient community here in the Northern Territory. So feel free to send through your resumes. We wouldn't say no.
You don't have any roles for podcasters up there, do you?
Oh, look, I'll have to have a look. I'll see what we've got.
Danni Mattiazzo, Assistant Principal at Larrakeyah Primary School up there in Darwin. Thank you very much for being part of Around the School Table.
Thank you.